Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. My guest on this episode is Rob Smith, veteran retailer and now the CEO and founder of the Phluid project, Get Phluid, and the Phluid Foundation. He has created a brand combining his profession with his passion and a commitment to social justice. Rob and I first met when he was guest on the Remarkable Retail podcast during the pandemic. We recently almost literally ran into each other at the Collision Tech Conference in Toronto on the show floor, so an excellent opportunity to catch up on the Phluid project and the retail environment in general from his vantage point. Let's listen in now. Rob, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining me on this pod. You and I met on Remarkable Retail, Steve Dennis, and we had a great conversation. Geez, I guess that was a couple of years ago. I think
almost 3 years ago. I think.
Yeah, so it's funny, right? When you think of COVID time, you kind of add 3 years, and you get to the right formula. So whatever amount of time it's been, and however it is that we initially connected, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me. Why don't we jump right in and talk a little bit about your extensive background in retail, a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living today.
Yeah, I've spent about 30 years in traditional corporate retail spaces, almost 22 years at Macy's. Then I was at Victoria's Secret for a couple of years, and then it was with Levi's and Nike. And then, I decided to make a shift out of corporate America and start my own business. And that's been about 5.5 years now.
And where are you based? Where do you hang your hat, so to speak?
I'm a bit of a gypsy right now, but most of my time is spent right here in Manhattan. Is where my office is. In our apartment. We've downsized significantly, and all of our employees are all over the world. And it's really nice to have a very virtual team. They move around. They just a lot of freedom and autonomy. And it's really nice. Same here. I encourage that.
It's a pretty big contrast. A couple of questions on your background. What sometimes retail has been described as the accidental career. Was it an accident for you, or did you always want to be
100% accidental? Totally accidental. It's so funny. I was at Michigan State University, and I really wanted to work for Procter and Gamble. And I remember getting a phone call from Burdines, the Florida store. And they said, "Hey, we heard you're interested in, Burdines, and there's an opening tomorrow. Can you make it?" I was like, "Heck yeah!" Let's go to another interview. And then turns out it was a department store in Florida, and I was in Michigan, and it was March, and I thought, "Yeah, I'll take a second interview and a free trip to Florida." And went down there and just absolutely loved it. And I was like, "That's it. I'm taking this job and going to move to Florida and start a career in retail." And I got to tell you, it was not very popular. In the household that I grew up in, my parents, especially my dad, didn't see it as a real career. It was more of I don't know what it was, but it definitely was not the business that he thought that I could go into to make money, to be successful. And that certainly didn't end up that way. But yeah, it was not a very popular decision in my family when I decided to do that.
And as you moved through your career, what is it that you did you spend more time in the marketing side or merchandising, a little bit of everything, and obviously in the leadership side? But you moved around some pretty impressive brands. What was your driving impetus behind your career, and where did you win, so to speak, when you moved to those places?
Yeah, great question. So my first job as a buyer was junior dresses, and it was like a fast business, and I really picked it up like test reorder those days where you could like buy, 90 pieces, test it, even less, and get a read and reorder. And boy, I was really good at it. I was buyer of the month for almost 2-3 straight years. And back then, Federated was in Chapter 11. And so the way to get out of Chapter 11, Alan Questrom made GM ROI, which is gross margin return on investment, right? So that the idea that if you had a high margin business that turned fast, you were basically like printing money. So I was turning about 3 times a season at about a 58% gross margin. So it was a very lucrative business. Yeah, and it was great. And then I was accelerated to a vice president around 26 years old, moved very fast, and then bounced around from Miami to LA to San Francisco to New York, and as left as executive vice president and moved from there, which was really tough because that was my family. That was where I grew up and really had a lot of support. but it was, I learned about merchandising, and I was, the merchandising part of it the whole time, and then decided to jump over to Victoria's Secret to learn a bit about direct to consumer, and, vertical business. Yeah. And that was really a great experience. Tough. It was a tough leap, but I learned a lot in that process.
Now, I want to talk about team. It's a very popular conversation amongst leaders and here on the podcast about managing remote teams. You're fully remote, so you've got some great experience. Plus, you've had decades of let's call it traditional management, in-person experience. So you like it. What's the secret sauce? I've talked to people who, they say, listen, I feel, though there's absolutely no evidence academically or otherwise, that I'm losing traction on things like innovation. I'm not sure that was happening to begin with, just because people were, together. But there is a bit of a thing about getting people together for whether it's culture or whether it's strategy. How do you manage those two things and make sure everybody's going in the right direction around the world?
Great question. Yeah. I think it's important to have some structure in the week. The structure with a team meeting, structure with updates, some structure that's every Tuesday at 2:00 or with this team. And I find that the structure really helps people stay on track, helps me stay up to date in the business. But we're working on. We just started talking about this, doing every season to get everyone together in New York or wherever it is, just to actually see people. Sometimes it's funny. There's some people who I've worked with for, almost 3 years, and sometimes I meet them. I'm like, oh my God, we've actually never seen each other before in real life, and you feel so familiar with them. You just, about their family, their pets, so much about them, but you never actually seen them, and that's a lot of fun. So I'm working on traveling to see my team, going to conferences together, doing special trips, but I'm working on trying to get us together. And our first all team get together is going to be in October. It's important to have those team building experiences. I've always done that my whole career. I've always had this ability to pull people together, pull their spouses or significant others in, and get to know, their children. I think it's really important to get to know not just their team, but also their families as well. So it really, people appreciate you knowing about their personal life. And I think that's something I've always been really comfortable with. So working into this new world of virtual, work to try to really get to know my team at a whole nother level. But sometimes that really takes, getting people together in person and having some, whiteboarding and drinks or not drinks or whatever, and get to know people.
I think the people are winning at that, so to speak, culturally and professionally, and it's very intentional. It sounds like it's very intentional for you. We have very, as you said, structure, and then we're going to get together, and it's very intentional. It's not a kind of a random intersection point at conferences. So it's a funny question this week, of course, is in the headline. Zoom is irony is dead, as Steve posted. Steve Dennis posted on LinkedIn. Irony is dead. The Zoom wants all their people back to their corporate headquarters. I think that has
that's very funny. That's very full of irony for sure.
Well, it's kind of like when Meta set up a metaverse store to sell the metaverse. Irony was starting to be dead by that point as well. I don't know. I think it's more about a bunch of executives staring at a very big, expensive office building that's completely empty and going let's just get some some people in here.
Sure. We're paying a lot of money.
Anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about the Phluid project. It's a multifaceted strategy and company, and it's got retail consulting, training, speaking. So take us through it. What's the origin story, and tell us all about it.
Yeah, the origin is started off with me deciding to break away from my really cushy, nice corporate job, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something more, I guess, altruistic, if that makes sense. And I decided to throw myself into the world and travel around the world and really immerse myself into cultures, religions, just ancient existences. And so I went through Central America, South America, into India, Nepal, and Tibet, and learned a lot about, Eastern philosophy, indigenous experiences. And on that journey, in a ceremony in the Amazon, I wrote down, when I was deciding what to do with my life, and I wrote down, consider opening a gender-free, non-binary shopping environment. I wrote Phluid in quotation marks.
Yeah.
And I go, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. And I opened the store 10 months later. It was like a whisper into my ear of what to do. And it's really an opportunity to merge my career, which is retail, and my passion, which is social justice, and put them together and create this, what at the time seemed like, I thought it was a brilliant idea. There would be everybody else would think it was brilliant too, and investors would flock in, but that didn't quite happen. But it was such a great way to launch the brand. It was an opportunity to do, gender-free fashion, something that's people like, what does that mean? And do it. And that's not online, but actually something you can walk in and touch and see, and really help people understand that a dress can be gender-free, or, makeup can be gender-free. And then, but there's also a lot about community and activism and education. So 2/3 of the store was retail and 1/3 was community space. And in about 2 years, I had almost 250 events, really highlighting artists and designers and creators, and fashion shows and comedy night. And it was just a great place for people to come together. I loved the experience. It was wonderful. And that's how the brand launched, and really just a great experience. But, it was definitely not a moneymaker. It was a good way to launch the brand. And I basically almost entirely self-funded it myself. So it was at a certain point, I had to close the door. But as the one door closed, lots of other doors opened. I started to shift into a wholesale model, and started to my first wholesale. I think Nordstrom and Target were my first two retailers that I started to put product in. And then I started to expand from apparel and accessories and scent collection. I'm getting into new categories next year, some new launches. And so the 5 pillars of the brand are, the direct to consumer business, our website, which is also a place with resources, and, a place you can go to and find some answers and places for you to, on your journey of learning and understanding. Then there's our wholesale business, and Phluid and pH Metafluid project. The Fusion brand has shown up, and it'll be about 10,000 doors this year that Phluid has shown up from, big box retailers, department stores, airports, college bookstores, all over the place. It's been a huge year, really a lot of growth and expansion there. And then there's our Get Phluid gender expansive training. So we do training, strategy, education for corporations, and that's going terrific. Then there's also the Phluid Foundation, our nonprofit. I created a nonprofit, basically taking corporate money and redistributing it to grassroots organizations across the country. And I've already gifted almost $700,000 in 2 years to between $2,500 to $30,000 gifts, which is incredible. And it feels really, really. That's probably the thing I'm most excited about, most proud of.
Well, congratulations.
So it's grown in lots of different ways. So many different ways.
A business question for you. So what's it like being on the other side of the table? I mean, as a merchant, you would know well negotiations with vendors. Now you're a wholesaler yourself. Has that been a transition for you to sit on the other side of the table? You learned a few things, or conversely, you're like, I know your tricks because I was on your table. So
I definitely know the tricks. I did spend almost 7 years at a company that does kids licensing. That's where I did Levi's and Nike. I was the chief product officer so I learned about wholesale, learned about design, production. I was able to, in my career, learn about almost everything in the process between, retail and design and product creation and supply chain management. And so, by the time I got to this job and shifting into this role to a wholesaler, I know what it's like. I will tell you, it feels great when you get a positive response from a buyer, from a merchant. At the same time, sometimes silence is deadly. You just don't understand why people, ghost you.
And it was going so well. I mean, it's going to be different when you're repping or representing a brand like Levi's versus a startup new Phluid, no matter what kind of the brand it was, right? Those are different conversations.
Yeah. But I'll tell you that people have been super responsive, very, very nice. Even, especially most of the business we do right now, although I'm trying to move past that, has been, Pride assortment. But people have been really receptive and supportive. And I think that in some ways, some of the what I experienced with the merchants at these retailers is that they want to do something. They want to participate in some type of, what's happened since George Floyd, and people are thinking, okay, I've got this job at this retailer. What can I do to participate in social change in a positive way? So by buying Phluid, they are participating in that. So that's been really nice. And I'll say lots of other brands maybe don't understand how to do business with a big corporation. So I come in understanding every part of the business and I'm able to work with them in a way that many small companies can't.
So you and I, as I said at the beginning off the top, we met through Remarkable Retail, Steve Dennis, but then we actually met in person. Talk about you and I have known each other for a bunch of years, but we met in person here in Toronto at the Collision Conference in a very busy show floor. I looked up and I saw you striding in my direction. I'm like, I know that guy. What brought you to Toronto to the Collision Conference?
First of all, you were the first person I saw in the conference. It was so nice. I'm like, this is going to be a great conference. You were the first person I ran into. It was great. What brought me there? They invited me to speak in, where's it, Portugal, I think, which is their big conference. And I couldn't do it, but I had a colleague actually who was living in Portugal. So he went and spoke. And then they asked me to come and speak at this one. And I thought it would be interesting because it's really not a place you'd expect Phluid to be at. It's a tech conference, but we thought it might be nice to go into a space where we're different as opposed to a LGBTQ conference or a DE&I conference. We thought it'd be interesting to try something where we're kind of the oddball out, I guess, and see how that worked. And it was, I gotta tell you, I don't know how much business I got out of it, but I had a really great time. I met tons of good people. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a positive experience. And you never know. Sometimes you plant seeds and they could sprout 2 years from now.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in that conference, so you never know. And apparently, it's now become one of the top fundraising or raise conferences in the world to go along with all the other initiatives. So, like you said,
that's right. They donated to our foundation, which was really nice as well.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Really happy about that. Yeah, for sure.
Let's change gears for a little bit. Let's talk about, you live at the intersection of culture and retail and brand. So I can't have you on a podcast like this without talking about the current environment. I mean, we've seen both tremendously positive momentum that helps drive change, but we've seen a few, steps backwards, particularly this year. Where do you see things? I mean, you're right in the middle of it. The media kind of tends to, I think, overplay, or are they? I mean, what's your perspective on where we are today versus where we should be and where we can be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's been an interesting year, especially around the Pride timing. I think it was, I'm sure, most people saw what happened between some beverage companies and some retail companies and this like backlash. And I think it's really unfortunate. I got to tell you, first of all, it's very, very sad that people are, extremists are like coming in and disrupting things and, causing problems for both the retailer, the employees, especially the guests in the space. And it's not a healthy way to direct your anger or frustration. I just think it's very unproductive. But they have, people have made some noise and some companies have responded well. They've done some, just kind of ignored it and let it fly by. Other companies have bended. I call it wavering. They've wavered. And I don't think that anyone who's going into this space should waver. You're in it or you're not. And I think that what's happened this year is that a lot of companies are reevaluating their position around these cultural moments, heritage months. And I think really just taking a pause and being reflective and saying, how do we do this and not end up being attacked? Or if we're going to be attacked, are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for the, I like to think of it like a tsunami. Like, are your roots grounded and planted so you can weather the storm? So I think For me, it's a few things. First of all, it's about showing up, first of all, with a strong culture. What does your culture look like inside your company? How are you engaging with the community? And then what does it look like from a product and a marketing stance that complements the culture and the community? And then you go into like product and marketing. But sometimes product and marketing gets ahead of culture and community. So I think it's an opportunity for, I think, every company to kind of look at things a little differently and approach it a little differently. I don't think that companies should walk away unless you don't do the work. Then I think that you're in a vulnerable position. And I think it's a good time for everyone to kind of pause, go into 2024 and say, how do we show up? And how do we like lock arms as a leadership team and say, let's go do this. Let's do this together, and let's like be prepared for what might happen, because things will happen. I think it's going to escalate next year further than what it was this year.
And you think, I guess you would assume that's going to be more escalation just because we've come closer to a presidential election? Is that what you think is a key driver?
And a lot of, some candidates anyways in the United States specifically, but some people are really focused on these issues of, diversity and inclusion. And I don't know, I think we can live in a space where it's not this or that, but this and that, and you can coexist with Christmas shop as well as a Pride assortment. That all of these things coexist. And there's lots of different customers, and I think that a good company should look at who the customer base is and serve them. And customers, it's a very dynamic and rich, diverse customer base from almost every single retailer.
That's a good point.
Or a company besides transcends, beyond retailers, but also any type of brand.
Yeah, including hopefully
services,
including hopefully at some point the social media platforms who might get on board and not amplify the odd wackos. Anyway, that's
algorithms, so not much you can do about that, and it's also the free speech too, I suppose. But
I suppose.
I mean, listen, I believe in having a conversation with reasonable people, listening to both sides, and trying to appeal to all customers. But if somebody's going to come into your space and be disruptive, and that I wouldn't tolerate that if I was a retailer.
Let's talk about shifting gears again. Given that you have an extensive background both in retail and Gen Z, I mean, the other thing I'm noticing, we're all noticing, is these pure play startups that are super uber fast fashion. You think of a Shein, for example, that is very, very cheap, very, very fast. And in some ways it feels at odds to the ethos, I suppose, of what we think about with a Gen Z population or Gen Z population that is more thoughtful and more caring about the companies behind it. How do you square that circle, at a broad level where you have people lining up to go to these stores that basically, you might as well ship it straight to a landfill. It's that cheap, and the ethics or whatever they are, sourcing ethics, whatever they are, but they don't seem to be front of mind for a lot of people that you think by reading the research papers by the big consultants that they are. How do you think about that? Because you're right in the middle of it.
It's a little confusing because there's words and there's actions. So, some people are like, I believe in the environment. I'll stand for the environment. I'm going to make decisions for the environment. I'm going to make decisions with companies that are inclusive and treat their people well. And then they go and buy a $10 item, and knowing darn well, I think something like 90% of fast fashion items end up in a landfill within a year, some outrageous number. Right. And that's not exactly the number, but somewhere around there, you get the idea. And so I think that's what's confusing is we're all working hard to speak to the issues that are important to young people, but sometimes as we do it, they're actually not supporting. They're not willing to pay more money for something that is policies around employees around the world, and willing to spend more money for better fabrics and all of those things. And sometimes they just say, yes, I want to support the environment's an important issue for me, but at the same time, I'm going to go buy a $10 item and end up in a landfill in 6 months. Yeah. So it's confusing, and I think we're all trying to figure out what to do about that. Every time I try to charge a little more for an item, item and wholesale, but at a price sensitive retailer, there's always a pushback. No, my customer won't pay $1 more for that item. And so I think as leaders in this space, we're thinking, okay, so you're saying this, but you're doing this, and it's frustrating. But I do think that we will shift just the same way gas cars are shifting to electric cars. That it happens not as fast as we want it to happen. Is what I think.
All right. What do you see for the rest of the year 2024 in terms of apparel retailer? Again, you're in the midst of it, having the great conversations. We came out of COVID and we had a bit of a bump up in demand, and now things are smoothing out a bit. What do you see for the balance of the year and into next year?
Yeah, I think that in general, folks are a little more relieved that the economy, at least in the United States, I'll speak specifically, that the economy doesn't look as dire as we thought it would be. There's most retailers are very cautious going, and will continue to be cautious, but less cautious, I think, than they were 6 months ago. There's a problem with a lot of retailers that things are just boring and safe. And what I love to see is more adventurous, like product creation, product placement, making things more exciting, making the shopping experience more exciting. And hopefully customers are going to continue to move like beyond, yes, basics, but move into more, expressive, stylish clothing. That's just my dream. Maybe that won't happen, but that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see, especially as I look ahead to next year, I look at what's happening in the runways, especially. I think men's fashion is super interesting, and how men's fashion is becoming a bit more. And I hate the word feminine, but it's but feminine silhouettes. And I think that men's fashion will be more exciting and interesting than women's fashion, because if it does trickle down, starting to see it in small pockets, like pearl necklaces and painted nails, and if you look at the runways, and I'm creating a collection which is certainly gender fluid in this more fashion space, but playing around with skirts, but mostly like my skirts are kilts and easy skirts to wear and to try. Kilts are always the gateway to a skirt that makes people a little more comfortable. But I'm excited. I'm really excited about at least what we're creating in fashion. And I think hopefully other people will be doing the same thing as well.
Well, last couple of questions for you. First of all, who do you gather inspiration from? Who inspires you, or what inspires you? You're an inspiring individual yourself, doing amazing work, but what inspires you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm always inspired by runways, and I, go through all the shows and look and see how it's edited and curated by some of the best companies like WGSN or Women's Wear Daily. But I think I also the streets. Like I love to walk around the streets of New York. I love to travel and see what's in like small stores around the world. And to me, the most interesting is the people that I see, and I'm always taking pictures and getting inspired by creative people who have really a unique expression of their fashion. So I most of it is from the streets.
All right. Last question. What's next for you and the Phluid project?
Oh, goodness. So I kind of alluded to it earlier. So we'll continue to work in the pride space and create pride clothing and continue to elevate that. I'm looking into new categories, like from pets to better fashion, like higher fashion, to hopefully beauty. I'm launching a like wellness, sex and wellness collection, which is pretty cool. I just want to be in as many spaces as I can where we make sense and can come with a point of view of love and acceptance and inclusion, and really just move into different spaces with that attitude. We have we're very grounded in purpose and values, and I want to continue to show up in spaces that have never really embraced that before. So it's going to be a really interesting year with all these new category extensions.
Well, fantastic. We'll all be watching. And listen, you're a busy fella, so thanks so much for taking the time to join me on the Voice of Retail podcast. It was great to.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. Thank you for the opportunity to share, and thanks for the great questions.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. Great to meet you in person, and thanks again for joining me on the podcast. Wish you much continued success and a great rest of the month. Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure to check out my other retail industry media properties, Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis, and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, consumer growth consultant, president of M.E. LeBlanc Company Inc, Maven Media, and keynote speaker. If you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Safe travels, everyone.